Hello everyone, this is Harry's Facebook for Monday the 29th of December 2025, and this is where we share the posts shared on the Autistic Radio Facebook page and have a discussion on the topics shared from them. So the first post is from Flourish with Neurodiversity, who's described as a coach helping you flourish and thrive, not just survive. Neurodiversity coaching and services, ADHD, EU, DHD and Tourette's, adults and children, sensory wellness, work, school, PIP, day early support, dyslexia assessments, training and resources. And what they've shared is the following. Neurodivergence isn't being overdiagnosed, it's being better recognised. For decades, many people learned to mask, struggle in silence, or were simply labelled as difficult, lazy, or too sensitive. Today, we finally have better language, better research, and better awareness to understand what was always there. An increase in diagnoses doesn't mean that these brains suddenly appeared. It means people are being seen, understood, and supported for the first time. Just like left-handedness increased once it stopped being punished. Neurodivergence is more visible because stigma is slowly being replaced with knowledge. This recognition leads to self-understanding, appropriate support, reduced shame, and better mental health. Neurodivergent people have always existed. What's new is that we're finally starting to listen.
We saw a kickback recently in the UK where one of our senior politicians asked a question and perhaps intimated that neurodiversity was being overdiagnosed. Now, I think perhaps the politician got a bit messed up and mixed up in their words, but this idea of overdiagnosis is a weapon that is being used against the autistic community. It reminds a lot of the people who've been out there long before I was identified as autistic of the gaslighting that occurred. There's nothing wrong with you idea. Now, yes, there's nothing wrong with us, but there is something that's different enough for there to be a diagnosis in certain circumstances. And this is a kickback against the equity and inclusion initiatives that have been happening, the diversity ethic.
The next post is from the Autistic Teacher, public figure, autistic and proud, sharing insight and understanding to help the autistic community based in the UK. And what they've shared is about the topic of small talk. Why do people feel the need to fill the gaps with meaningless conversation? I would rather have a deep conversation, share information and understanding. I really hate small talk, probably because I'm terrible at it, but I just don't see the point of it, and I have no idea what to say. I would much rather say something meaningful or share information that is interesting or important.
I've never liked small talk for the same reason. I prefer meaningful conversation. And I also struggle to find anything to fill the gaps. And if I get onto a subject I'm interested in, I'm often criticised for boring people.
I don't like small talk, but I seem to be able to mask it in a way because I know the topics that people generally will throw in. For instance, they'll mention the weather, and if you're travelling somewhere, if it's by bus, they'll talk about the bus times, the service. And if you're travelling by train, the train times and the service, good and bad. It's not something I'm comfortable with, but it's something that I do so that I don't feel guilty for not doing it in the first place. So maybe there's two ways to that.
It's a good barometer in more than one way. It's a barometer for me to know how I'm doing, so I can sort of gauge my ability to do small talk is helping me to know how I'm doing. that day with people. And the other thing it's a barometer of that I find helpful for me is getting a read on people. So I can sort of pick up on sincerity and some or red flags that I would need to know by engaging in it. And then I choose ones like the weather or something practical because I can see that those are practical things. However, there's a lag time with me because I'm always thinking about the use of words. For example, I'm fine doesn't mean what people think it means to me, but then I'm splitting hairs because it does mean that too.
It's looking back to the masking thing and performance. But then again, from what Robbie said as well, it's like if I do talk about something, as a special interest, I have, maybe not as an adult, but I certainly as a child, I do recall being told in different ways, sometimes more explicit than others, that I was talking a lot of nonsense or I wasn't talking about anything interesting in comparison to what is supposed to be normally interesting for people or children to speak about at that particular time, whatever that was. I mean, at the time, I wasn't interested in football, and I was seen as an oddball for even that. So, if you weren't interested in football, there was nothing much else to talk about. Sometimes it was things like comic books and action films and things like that you sometimes get sort of away with, but there was other things that I was interested in. I like to talk about bus times and kind of structures of electricity pylons and all kind of things that were quite quirky. I was fascinated with lampposts, and nobody that I knew, and up to now, I've never known anybody to be interested in that particular topic. It's about the balance of people being interested, but the small talk thing is most difficult because it's rehearsed, but it's not, because you don't know when you're going to need it.
Could a part of it be your attitude to people in general?
Yeah, maybe a defense mechanism, being cautious. Past experiences put me off, or past experiences even helping me. Of course, depending who I'm talking to and what about, and depending on what mood I'm in, and depending on the situation. Like, for instance, I mean, small talk that has helped is like coming home from traveling somewhere and the train or the bus or whatever is running late or it's not running at all, but you meet someone who's going through the sort of the same as you for different reasons, and you feel there's a connection there, and then there's a small talk that comes from there, then you're kind of, it's a bit of a moan and a groan, but it's quite comforting because you feel you're not alone in this situation you're in, and that sort of small talk helps. Robbie has shared a text saying that I am always wary of triggering conversation, news, politics, gossip, etc. I get that. And where I am more wary is when I'm in a pub having a quiet pint and there's some people that have just got things to say about certain politics. It doesn't need to be politics, it could be a lot of things. A lot of things that's quite sensitive and things that people shouldn't say, but people get so called brave and they're alcohol induced. And it's like, no, I don't really want to talk to this guy or woman, but I don't want to cause a fight either. That sort of small talk. I don't know if you can call that small talk, but it might be to them.
So, do you mean the content of the conversation is small talk, or the negotiation, the social negotiation of a difficult situation can sometimes be small talk too?
Yeah, what I mean is it doesn't help when the pub has news on, which, there's nothing wrong with that really. But there's a news item and it just triggers a conversation which isn't comfortable. But sometimes people sitting thinking they're giving small talk is actually quite offensive, or just it's getting towards a sort of direction that you don't want to be involved in, especially if you're not in agreement with it.
Yeah, I think that some people might realize that you're a bit obliged to do the small talk. And very early in the small talk, it's as if you're trapped into it. That, in a way, if you're following the rules of small talk, you're obliged to agree a little bit. The way I find that very uncomfortable. I don't know if that's what you mean, but it could be a controversial thing that you absolutely don't agree with, and it feels hard to get out.
There is that element of feeling trapped. But there's one thing as well, is when you're being polite in small talk and then the person's speaking with you and then you're thinking, I don't really want to speak with them just because you're not comfortable. Doesn't mean they're bad people, it's just that you're not really in the mood. But sometimes you feel actually trapped in the conversation because you've actually made a reply.
Yeah, I was going to say this kind of echoes something we were talking about in the previous hour thing about the need to say anything at all, when you're social or in a conversation. So sometimes in social settings, I'll try not to say things, even if asked, or if people are sharing opinions.
I find I just kind of get too intense about like the small talk though. Like I'll get really into the conversation about the weather and the person's life. Like I just always feel like I'm a bit off. And I would say this year I've just started to just avoid it, and I feel loads better for it. Having just more connections that are deliberate and letting myself be a lot quieter in public spaces. If I have to be there like for kid stuff. But yeah, small talk, not easy.
I think the problem for us is that we have limited social batteries. So if we use our interactions up on small talk, we feel as though we're wasting our energy. The thing, though, is that society works on small talk, and small talk for neurotypical people or people who aren't like us, it gives them a solidarity. It allows them to move to other subjects. It's a dance where they're checking each other out for all kinds of other different communications. And sometimes we miss out on the opportunity of deeper connections because we dismiss the small talk. So I have to try not to be somebody who says, oh, I hate small talk, because I know that many of the conversations I have had in the past that have gone somewhere have been instigated by a tiny bit of small talk. I just moved it away from the small talk as quickly as I could.
The next post is from Autism Awareness, which is a health and wellness website, health, beauty, community centre, raising autism awareness, celebrating neurodiversity and spreading understanding every day. And they've shared the following. Autism, for your information. Many times autistic children and adults appear to be in their own world. However, that does not mean they should be excluded from yours. Say hello, offer a high five, talk to them, get on their level, but please don't treat them as if they don't exist. Bridging worlds, a simple reminder to include our friends on the autism spectrum.
There's their world, your world, and then I'm thinking, but you're both in the same world, So it's this thing about separation where you say there's one world and another world. And for someone to be in their own world, fair enough, that might be just an attention mode, but they're still here with you. So it's language again, isn't it, Harry?
I was wondering if it was focused on children because it sounded a little either like they were talking about children with autism or possibly patronizing. Children, yes, okay, children then. Yeah, I don't know. If they had headphones on, I don't know if you should high five. I think Ray covers that though when he talks about which world, whose world.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, maybe not if we've got our headphones on, hood up, all of the signs. But yeah, like sometimes there's quite a lot of the time I'd rather have like a wee invisibility cloak and be left to my own devices. But it is nice, like, I think about there's times that I'm watching my kid play football and I don't manage to like join in the huddle of mums, like they seem to be able to chat for the whole time. But it'd be so nice just to be like be able to kind of wave and acknowledge and feel like people were like, hi, and then you can just sit down rather than that suspicious look because you're not joining in, because I'm not joining in.
I want us to try and look at this as benevolently as possible, because yes, if we look at it in one way, the language can seem a bit patronising. But if we look at its intention is to say, maybe if you're an autistic mum, or you know somebody who's autistic, or you're in that world, you're trying to reach out to other people and say, look, don't ignore these people because they appear distant from you. Let's give people an opportunity when we can, rather than shunning them. So, yeah, let's just say that it's an attempt at positivity to give us opportunities to interact, not be forced to interact.
Yeah, appear might be that situation where you're kind of concerned that someone's kind of remote and detached and maybe lost and struggling. So it's just another way of interpreting the word appear there. You know, an adult who appears to be in their own world, you know. But of course, just even thinking about that, I think, would I approach a person like that and just say, come on?
No, I know what you're saying, Ray, but I know what I've done, and I've done it many times. I've been on a train or in a place and I've nodded or done something tiny and then left it a very long time to let that person know that they are seen. And that has started conversations. People see my Autistic Radio badge on the lapel jacket and they start a conversation about that potentially. Advocating out there in the community sometimes is getting past the missteps in communication that, yeah, can irritate a bit. But as Robbie says in the text, in one way it's about fitting into neurotypical society, but in another way it's also about inclusion.
I really like the way you said, Jules, a small, like a nod, that is a very good one. But I think you said a small wave. But I think this really excellent communication where it's not a large gesture, it's a safe gesture.
I had an experience this summer where acknowledging someone in the passing was almost letting too much in, you know, because they were quite intense.
I think there's a great tip from Robbie in the text there. He says, how about neurotypical people taking interest in the interest that the autistic person is taking an interest in? So instead of breaking the situation, how about being sideways to the situation, and rather than confronting the person, look at the piece of interest and show interest and not make a song and dance about it. Like Teresa says, it needs to be something gentle and small and safe. Safe is a great word that Teresa used there.
The next post is from Politics Home. It's an article based in Politics Home website. And it's an article which is about Labour Member of Parliament MP Kat Eccles, who is neurodivergent. And the title of it is All Peopled Out, Labour MP Kat Eccles on being autistic in Westminster. So it's part of the UK government. And it was an article from the 30th of March, and it was for Autistic Awareness Week at the time. And it says, speaking to Politics Home ahead of Autism Awareness Day, Labour MP Kat Eccles says she hopes that sharing her story will help make Parliament more accommodating to neurodivergent people. Labour MP Kat Eccles can remember feeling like she didn't fit in from a young age. Eccles was an only child, but despite her parents' attempts to get her to mix with other children by sending her to dance classes, swimming, and brownies, she gravitated towards the adults or just doing her own thing. Eccles was elected the Labour MP for Stourbridge at the July general election. 10 months on, during Neurodiversity Celebration Week and ahead of Autism Awareness Day in April, she told Politics Home she feels ready to speak more publicly about her autism and ADHD diagnoses.
We have always been in these places. We have always been MPs, but now some people who are autistic feel able to be open in the public eye. And this person is going to be continuously trolled and attacked in social media and conventional media just because she's a woman. And now she's added another layer on top of that, neurodivergency or even disability, or even the contentious space between the two. So it's an amazing thing that she's decided to do that. But I'm imagining that as an autistic person, she felt as though she just had to.
I was going to use the word normalising there, and I thought it's quite a, an ambiguous term, normalising. But yeah, it sounds like what she'll do is normalise her concerns, her being, her awareness, whether that be as a woman or whether that be as someone with ADHD or autism. By being public and speaking about things, you can take that sting out of it, hopefully, where she won't be trolled and persecuted, but just seen as someone representing a concern and a cause within, the Mother of Parliaments.
Well, thanks everyone. That was a great conversation once again. And thanks to all who shared the post that we talked about tonight. This is Harry's Facebook for Monday the 29th of December, which is part of the Autistic Radio Days, which has happened between 27th to the 30th of December 2025. Really enjoyed tonight, and now I'll hand over to Jules.
So thanks, Harry, for the 555 today, and we know that you're there every Sunday for another interesting conversation around the shares that you have on the Autistic Radio.com Facebook page. It's always a stimulating conversation, and I thank you for that. We're in Radio Days. This is the third of 4 days, so Harry will be back for the fourth of the 555. Fittingly, the last of tomorrow's broadcasts.